Hello. Today I'll be talking about the board game Warrior Knights. This came out in 2006. I don't remember exactly when I acquired it, but I show on Board Game Geek my first log play of this is 2012, so I think I probably got it somewhere around 2012. That would be my guess. Anyway, let me go ahead and get started with how to set up and then how to play. As I'm sure it's no surprise, the first thing you'll do is place the board in the center of the play area. Next, take your event deck, which is the deck with this back, shuffle it, put it on its space on the board shown here, then take the top card and place it at the bottom of the event deck. Take your fate cards, which have this back, shuffle them, and then place them on this space on the board that shows the matching back. Take the mercenary deck that has this back, shuffle it, then deal out next to the board one more than the number of players in your game. I'm going to have a 3-player game, so I'll deal out 4 cards. Take your agenda deck that has this back, place it near the board, and deal out 3 cards into this current agendas spot on the board. Take the 8 neutral action cards. They have the same card back as all action cards, but their fronts have this brown border. So just take those neutral action cards and place them somewhere near the side of the board. From your influence tokens, take 10 influence per player in the game. So we're going to have 3 players, so that'll be 30 influence, and you'll place those in the influence pool area here on the board. So here I've placed 30 influence in the influence pool. All the rest of your influence can just be set aside. And you can see the influence are in denominations of 5, 1s, and 3s. Next, you'll place your plastic cities on the city locations on the board, but if playing with less than 6 players, a certain number of cities will not be placed, so they'll be considered raised cities. So depending on the number of players, you need to raise a number of kingdom city areas randomly by drawing from the fate deck. So in a 3-player game, 7 cities need to be raised. That includes kingdom cities, which is cities in this area of the map, not these overseas cities that are at the top of the map. So I went ahead and placed a city on all the overseas areas. Now we'll draw from the fate deck to determine which 7 cities in the kingdom area will be raised and not get a city. So we draw a fate card and we look here. So Cadiz, well, that's up in the overseas, so that one doesn't count, so we'll draw another one. We got Straven. Where are you, Straven? Alright, that's here, so I'll just put this card here to remind me that I'm not going to put a city there. Draw another one. We got Syracuse. That's overseas, so that one won't count. Draw another one. We got Rozak. That's here, so I'll place that to remind me. Let me go ahead and finish this. I'll get all 7 determined, and then place the cities on all the other spaces. Alright, so I determined the 7 kingdom cities that would be raised at the beginning of the game. Thera, Froley, Rosak, Turan, Ulby, Bingen, and Straven. And the rest, I'll get the plastic cities. The cards you drew from those, you will reshuffle into the fate deck. Players then pick a color, and each player, after they've chosen the color, will receive a stronghold card with their baron's name of the color they've chosen. They will receive the 4 plastic noble pieces of the color that they've chosen, along with the matching noble cards. You'll notice that the card has a shape that matches the bottom of each noble, so you could just place the noble on that shape, circle, and it has the baron's name and their special powers, and so forth. Each player will also receive his 12 action cards. All action cards of all players and the neutral action cards have the same back, but the player's action cards will actually have a border that matches their color. Each player should also receive the 12 control markers that match their color. Each player will receive their 8 Baron markers that match their color. Each player receives the 4 regular troop cards that match their color, as well as their stronghold token. You will randomly choose one player to get the chairman of the assembly token. Again, you'll do that with the fate cards. Anytime you're supposed to choose something randomly in this game, you use the fate cards. So for this, we'll draw the top fate card. We look here in this section when we're looking for a random baron. That's the blue player, so he will get the chairman of the assembly token. Now we have to randomly choose another player to receive the head of church token. So again, we'll randomly draw a card. Look here. Well, that's the blue player again. He can't get both of them, so we'd randomly draw again. This player is not in play right now, so we'll have to draw again. Blue again. All right, red. So red will get the head of church. We're playing with red, green, and blue here today. And these will now get shuffled back into the fate deck. Each player then receives 15 crowns. So these are 5s and these are 1s. So each player receives 15 crowns. Each player then receives one random mercenary troop card worth 50 troops and one worth 100 troops. And again, we draw fate cards to find what nationality of mercenary they get. So we're drawing here, we'll say for the blue player, so we'll say we're drawing for his 50 mercenary, and this is where you look when you're looking at mercenary nationalities, so Swiss. So we'll get the mercenary deck the mercenary deck and find a 50 value Swiss card, like so. And now we'll draw to see what nationality for 100 value. Alright, so English, so we have to find an English mercenary troop card that's worth 100. Alright, like so. So 100 English and a 50 Swiss. Those will go to the blue player. Now we'll do the same thing to find a 50 and 100 for the red and green players. I'll do that off camera. Alright, I've done that, so now we'll shuffle these cards that we used to select the mercenaries back into the fate deck, and then we'll reshuffle the mercenary deck. Next, players will assign their mercenary troops and their regular troops to their nobles and stronghold. You have to assign all the troops you have, but you don't have to assign them. You don't have to assign any to a stronghold, and you don't have to assign noble or troops to all your nobles. But any nobles that don't have troops will not be placed on the board at the start of the game. So again, you assign your troops to your nobles and or stronghold as you see fit, but you must assign all your troops. So let me get that done. And just to show you assign them by sliding them under the noble. So like if I wanted to assign these 50 regular troops to my noble Louis de Sion here, you just slide them under like that so you show what type of troop they are and the number of troops. And so we'll do that with the rest of these troops. So as you can see here, I assigned 100 regular troops to this guy, 150 troops, 50 regular, and 100 mercenaries to this guy, 50 regulars to this guy, 50 regulars to this guy, and 50 mercenaries to my stronghold. Again, you could put none on your stronghold, and you don't have to assign troops to all your nobles, but any noble that doesn't have troops assigned to him at the beginning of the game won't be able to be placed on the board at the beginning of the game. Now he can come in later when you get other troops, but won't be placed at the beginning if you don't assign them troops. And so as you can see, I've had the green player, Baron Raoul d'Armand, assign his troops to his nobles, and also my Baron Thomas Edmund Matter assigned his troops as well. Next, starting with the chairman of the assembly and proceeding clockwise, players will place their stronghold tokens on the board. It can be placed in any kingdom area on the board that does not contain a unraised city, so you can't place it in one of the spaces that has one of the plastic cities, but you can place it in any of the empty cities or spaces where there's a raised city that a plastic wasn't placed. Now in a 2 or 3 player game, you cannot place a stronghold. You cannot place your stronghold in one of the outer rows or columns, so it can only be placed in the 16 inner spaces. So we'll say the blue player, he's going to place his stronghold up here in Froley. The red player, he'll place his here, and we'll just say the green player is going to place his here. Again, because I'm playing a 3-player game, it can't be in one of the outer rows or outer columns. Then starting with the last player to place his stronghold and going counterclockwise, players will take turns placing their nobles on the board. Of course, they can only place nobles that have troops assigned to them. They can place them in any area on the board, but you can't place your noble in a space that has another player's stronghold or another player's noble, and it can't be placed in any of the overseas areas. So, for example, the green player, maybe he takes this baron and places him here. Now the red player gets to place one of his barons. Maybe he places it here. Now the blue player gets to place one of his. Maybe he places it here. Back to the green player. Maybe he places one of his here. Red player, maybe he places one of his up here. Back to the blue player. So I'll finish this and come back. So I've finished placing all my nobles. Final thing you'll do is just place your supply of tokens. You got breach tokens, siege tokens, casualty tokens, expedition tokens, your crowns, vote tokens, and faith tokens. You'll just place those somewhere near the board. I have mine in these token holders where I have, and then just on the nearby. So anyway, that's it. We're all set up and ready to play. Alright, so how do we play? Well, the game is played in rounds, and each round made up of 3 phases. The phases are the planning phase, the actions phase, and the upkeep phase. So first thing that'll happen in the planning phase, each baron will look at his hand of action cards. He's going to choose 6 of them that he wants to be played this round. He'll choose the 2 that he wants to be played first. For instance, we'll say this player chooses this card and this card. He's going to choose 6, so he's going to choose 2 that he wants to be played first, then 2 that he would be like to play second, so maybe like these 2, and then, gosh, I don't know, just 2 more. Okay, so those are the ones that will be used this round. So he'll put them in these action spaces. Again, the ones that he wants to be played first, he'll place here. The ones that he wants to be played second, he'll place here. And the ones he wants to be played third will be placed here. So each Baron will do that simultaneously. They'll put 2 cards in each of the 3 action spaces. So I've gone ahead and done that here for all the 3 Barons I have. So in a 3-player game, you would have 6 cards in each pile because they would each have put 2 in each one. Then the chairman of the assembly, remember that's the player with the gavel here, is going to take the neutral action card deck. They're going to shuffle that, and then without looking at them, they're going to add an additional 2 cards to each stack. Then without looking at the remaining 2 cards, they'll just put them back in the area of the board where the neutral action cards are kept. Then the chairman of the board, and he can ask the assistance of the other players, will then shuffle each of these decks individually and place them back on the action spaces. So in this way, after the cards are shuffled in each of the action spaces, each player knows they have 2 actions in each of the action space decks, but they've been shuffled in with the other player's actions and the 2 neutral actions in each deck. So the player knows the 2 actions that they put in each action space will come up, but they don't know in what order they'll come up. So they don't know exactly at what point they'll get to take their action and which of their actions will be drawn first. So that will end the planning phase. So the next thing that will be is the actions phase, and the chairman of the assembly will start with the action space 1. He'll draw the top card and read it aloud. This one is levy taxes, gain 1 crown for each area that contains one of your nobles. This is the red player's action, you can see by the red border. So he would carry out this action, and then he will allocate it to one of the special phase areas as shown here, and the color on the banner at the bottom also identifies it. So after the red player carries out this action, he will then put it in the taxation special area. Then the chairman of the assembly will draw the next card, and again, now this one's for the green player. He will carry out that action and then place it in the special phase area. So you'll continue like that. The chairman will draw cards until all the cards in the first action space are resolved. Then he'll move on to the second action space deck, turn over those cards one at a time. The players taking their actions, and if the neutral action card is resolved, the chairman of the board just reads and resolves that, and so forth until you finish with all the cards in the third action space. And once that's done, that will end the actions phase, and then you'll move on to the upkeep phase. But let's talk more about the actions phase. Let's talk about each of the possible actions that the players have cards for. So we've kind of seen here the levy taxes card. So this action is pretty straightforward. The player that plays it gains 1 crown for each area that contains one of his nobles. So if the green player played this, he He has one, two, three, four different areas that contain his nobles. So he would collect 4 crowns from the supply and put that in his area. Now, if he had 2 nobles in one area, then he would only collect 3 crowns because his nobles are only in 3 different areas. So that one's pretty simple. Alright, one of the other possible actions a player may play is the draft soldiers action. This one allows you to place one of your Baron markers on the mercenary track for free. So this is the Baron marker, and this is the mercenary draft track. So you could place it on one of the spaces. Now you can never place it higher than a space that has than the number of players that are playing the game. So in this case, we're playing a 3-player game. If somebody played that draft soldiers and was needed to put one of their Baron markers on the mercenary track, they could put it on one of the 2 blank spaces, or the 2 or the 3. They couldn't put it on the 4 because there's only a 3-player game. So you could put it up to the 2 blanks of the 2 or 3. If you were playing with 4 players, you could put it as far as 4. So you would just put your marker on there. If there's ever more Baron markers on there than there are a number of players. So in this case, if there were markers here, 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 and here in a 3-player game, then you then have 4 markers on there. That will then trigger a mercenary draft. And we'll talk more about the mercenary draft later. But just for now, the draft soldiers action allows you to place one of your Baron markers on the mercenary track. And again, you can't put one on a space that has a number higher than the number of players. And after you played that card, you see it says wages and has the red banner, so you'd put it in the special area here for wages. Alright, another type of action that might be drawn is the rally support. It says gain 2 votes. These are the votes here. So in this example, if the green player played this, he would gain 2 votes into his area. And then if he has more votes than any other Baron, he becomes chairman of the assembly. Currently the blue player has no votes. The red player has no votes. So the green player, if he played that, would then take the chairman of the assembly token and put it in his area, and now he's the chairman of the assembly because he had more votes than any other Baron when he played this. And then you'll see that goes in the assembly special area, and then it's shown by the blue banner. So you would place it here in the assembly special area. Alright, one of the other actions you can take is serve the church. Gain 1 faith. So you'd get one of these faith tokens. Since this is the red player's card, he would gain a faith token, put it in his play area. Then if you have more faith than any other Baron, become head of the church. Well, he is currently already the head of the church, and he does have more faith than any other player because none of the other players have any faith at all. So he would just remain head of the church. And then as you can see, this can go in any of the special areas, and that's shown with both the yellow, blue, and red banner at the bottom. So the Baron that played this would decide which of the special areas he wanted to place this. So maybe he chooses the assembly. Another action you might play is the mobilize forces. Now this one allows you to select an area on the board. Then you can move any of your nobles into that area if they can reach it. And then you can start a battle in that area, or you can just move. Or if you were already in the area that you wanted to be, you could start a battle with this card without moving. So you could move and that's all, or you can move and start a battle, or if you're already in the area where you want to start a battle, you could just start a battle without moving. So let's look at this one a little more in detail. So select an area. So normally a noble can only move 1 space. So if this guy wanted to move to this area, he played the mobilized forces, he can move this noble into that area. As I said, normally a noble could only move 1 space. However, if your noble is on a road You can move up to 3 spaces as long as all of the movement is on the road. So if a green player played mobilized forces and he wanted to choose this area, lens, he could move this noble all the way there. 1, 2, 3, because he moved on the road the entire time. But if you're not on the road, you can normally only just move 1 space. But as I mentioned with the mobilized forces, you're selecting an area and then you can move any of your nobles into that area again as long as they could reach it. So if the green player played mobilized forces and he chose this area, he could move both of these nobles into that area because they can both reach it in one move. Or if he chose lens, like I talked about before, he could move this noble 1, 2, 3 because he moved on the road the whole time. He could also move this noble there since it's only 1 space away. He couldn't move this noble there because he's not starting on the road, so he could only move 1 space to there. And this noble would only be able to move 1 space. So they would not be able to move because they could not make it to the area with their movement. Also, when moving, you cannot cross a river, so this player could not move from here to here. You can only cross the river at the bridge spaces, so if this player wanted to get over to this area, he would have to play a mobilized forces or a card that allows him to move and just move 1 space, and then on the next time he played a mobilized forces or a card that allowed him to move, he would then be able to move 1, 2 because both of those are on a road, and then he can move up to 3. So it would take 2 different move cards to allow this player to get all the way over here since he can't cross the river. You can also not go across the mountains, so this player could not move across these mountains like this, or this player could not move across these mountains like this. You can also not move through an area that contains another noble unless they allow it. You can move into the area, but you cannot continue on. This player cannot continue on through that area unless the blue noble allowed it. A noble may also not move through another barren city without asking for permission. I know we haven't talked about controlling cities yet, but for instance, if the red player controlled this city and the green player played a mobilized forces and he wanted to move 3 along the road, 1, 2, 3, like maybe he chose this area, he could not move through this space with a city, even though there's not a noble in it, unless the red player allows it. So he would have to ask him permission to do it. Otherwise, he could only move into that area, but he could not move through it. So again, you can't move through an area that contains another player's noble or another player's city unless they allow it. Though you can move through an area with another player's stronghold as long as there's not a noble in it without their permission. You can move through areas with neutral cities without anybody's permission. And again, with the mobilized forces card, if you move into an area with a neutral city or another player's city or another player's noble or stronghold, you can start a battle if you wish, but we'll talk more about battles here in a little bit. So once you play the mobilized force card, if you only used it to move, then you place it in the wages space as seen here. So you would place it here in the wages special area space. If you only used it to start a battle, then you would place it in the assembly space as shown here. If you used it to both move and then start a battle, then you have the choice of placing it in either the assembly or the wages space. The player who played that card would make that choice. After you've played a mobilized forces card and moved nobles or started a battle, any noble that moved or started a battle is then exhausted, and you exhaust them just by flipping their card over to their exhausted side, and that noble cannot move or start a battle again this round. They'll be able to flip back to their unexhausted side during the upkeep phase, but for the rest of this round, that noble cannot, once it's exhausted, cannot move or start a battle. Now they can still defend themselves in a battle if they're attacked, but they can't start or participate in a battle unless they're defending. And the last type of action card a player might play is the versatile strategy. They can either gain 2 crowns to their supply, or gain 1 vote, or move one of their nobles, or start a battle. Not move and start a battle, they can move or start a battle. And they can, or they can pay to place one of their Baron markers on the mercenary track. Now, remember when we talked about the draft soldiers card, they got to place one of their Baron markers on the mercenary track for free. If you use the versatile strategy card to place one of your Baron markers on the mercenary track, you have to pay the amount of crowns shown depending on which space is available and which one you put it on. So if the 3 space here was still available in a 3-player game, you could place it there, but it would cost you 5 crowns. Whereas if you placed it here, it would cost you 8 crowns. So the better way to put one of your Baron markers on the mercenary draft track is to use the draft soldiers, but you can use the versatile strategy. And once you've resolved your versatile strategy card, this is the one type of action card that does not go into one of the special areas. This one goes back into your action card deck. Whereas the cards that are in a special area will stay there until that special area is triggered and resolved. So if that doesn't happen during a round, then the next round you may not have all the cards to choose from that you had the previous round, because some of them will be in one of the special areas: taxation, assembly, or wages. Alright, so we've talked about all the action cards that the players have, but remember we also shuffle some neutral action cards into the action spaces, so some of the neutral action cards will be drawn also. So let's talk about the different neutral action cards. So one of the neutral action cards is the important event, and it says the head of the church chooses a baron to resolve the top event card. He must pay 1 faith to target himself with a green event or another baron with a red event. So when the important event card comes up, whoever is currently the head of the church holds this token. We'll look at the event deck, and then depending on the color of the event, if it's a red one, those are usually bad. So whoever draws that card is probably going to have some negative effect on them. So if the top card is red, the head of the church either has to draw it himself and resolve whatever it says, which will probably be bad for him, or he can pay 1 faith and choose one of the other barons to draw that event card. If the top event card, let's just find it. So there's a red, there's a green, and there's a blue. So if the top event card is green when this card is drawn, then the head of the church, usually green is usually good for the person that's going to draw that card. So if the top event card is green, the head of the church can pay 1 faith to draw that himself, and usually something good will happen for them. Or if he doesn't want to or doesn't have a faith to pay, he can choose one of the other barons to draw that green event card, and then they will get some benefit usually. The other color is blue, and that doesn't usually matter who draws you that, so usually the head of the church can choose anybody to draw that, even himself. and that's usually something that may affect all players. So for an example, we'll just look at this blue one. It says, Pope calls for holy war. The next baron to capture a neutral overseas city scores 2 influence. And of course, those are the overseas cities, and currently they're all neutral. So usually the blue ones are something that's going to affect anybody, so it doesn't matter who draws that. And once an event card is drawn, it's just discarded in a discard pile. If the event deck was to ever become empty, then you'd reshuffle the event cards um, and then form a new draw deck from the discards, but that's probably unlikely. All right, another type of neutral event card that may be drawn is the Fund Expeditions. It says the chairman of the assembly may start an empty expedition. Each baron may invest up to 5 crowns, then advance all other expeditions. So whichever player is the chairman of the assembly holds this at the time that card is drawn, can decide to start an expedition. There's 3 possible expeditions: China, the Spice Islands, and Ceylon. If none of those expeditions are currently underway, then the chairman of the assembly can choose to start any of them. If 1 or 2 of them are already underway, then they can only choose to start one of the ones that's not underway. But to do that, they say, okay, I'm going to start maybe a Spice Islands expedition. Then the other players have the opportunity to invest in that expedition, but with up to 5 crowns. So if they decide to invest in it, so maybe blue player says, all right, I'm going to invest in it with 3 crowns. So he takes one of his baron markers with 3 crowns and puts that here. And then the other barons, if they want to invest, do the same. And then the chairman of the assembly will place a marker, an expedition marker on the number 1 space. Then any expeditions that were already started, like maybe there was one already started for Ceylon, any expeditions that had already been started are advanced. Now the one that just started does not get advanced. If any of them advance to the 3rd spot, then it's time to resolve that expedition. To resolve the expedition, for any expeditions that reach the 3 spot, you draw a fake card and look here, and then depending on what expedition type it is, this is the Ceylon expedition, each investor would get 2 times their money. If it had been a Spice Islands or a China expedition, each investor would get 3 times their money. Now, the money that they invested goes into, goes back into the supply, so you don't get 3 times your money and the money you invested. So, for instance, if a player had invested 3 money or 3 crowns in the Spice Islands and it finished, and they would get 3 times, so they would get 9 total crowns. But then the crowns they invested would go into the supply. So they wouldn't get 9 plus what they invested back. They would get 9 total. So they could take what they invested and get 6 more, or get 9 and then put those 3 back in the supply. Either way. But anyway, so when a expedition finishes, you draw a fake card and see what happens. Now the other results, I mean, you could get less. You could get 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, or you may get one that says the result is no news. If that happens, then the expedition marker just stays on the 3 spot, and you'll have to wait for another Fund Expeditions card to come up, and then determine, then you draw again for that expedition and see what you get. You could also get a fleet lost, in which case the expedition is lost and any money invested in it just goes back to the supply, and none of the investors get any return on their investment. And so once you've resolved an expedition that reached the final space, then you just take the ship token off, and that expedition is free to be started again when somebody draws a fund expedition card. Now, of course, the chairman can decide he doesn't want to start an expedition when he draws that card, and then just no expedition is started, though any other current expeditions would still advance on the track and be resolved if they reached the 3 spot or were already on the 3 spot. And any Ceylon expeditions have the better chance of success, but may not pay off as much. Spice Islands have the middle chance of success, but pay off a little better. And the China expedition has the least chance of being successful, but usually pays off the most if it is successful. One other thing I didn't mention, when an expedition is started, if the chairman of the assembly decides to start an expedition, once everybody has decided to invest or not, after that's been decided and their crowns have been placed on the expedition, the head of the church can then decide to bless the expedition by taking one of his faith tokens and placing it on the expedition, and it's blessed. And when that happens, when that expedition reaches the 3rd spot and is resolved, you draw 2 fate cards and take the better result rather than just drawing 1 fate card and getting what you get. Alright, another neutral action card that may come up is the upgrade defenses, where you have 2 choices. Each baron may spend 4 crowns in order to fortify a city. So when you take control of a city, you place one of your control markers under the plastic city marker, and that shows you control it. And then it has a base defense down here, so the base defense of this city is 100. And then this is how much money you get when the taxation special phase happens, which we'll talk that in a little bit. That's how much money you get for controlling that city. If you decide to fortify your city using this upgrade defenses, pay 4 crowns. You can flip this token over to its fortified side, and then it adds 100 to your defense of that city. So this city would have a total of 200 defense, and it gives +1 crown for the taxation phase. So this city would generate 3 crowns when it's taxed instead of just 2. Or instead of doing that, you can repair 1 city at a cost of 2 crowns for breach. We haven't talked about breaches, but these are breach tokens, and they get placed on a city when it takes damage when it's attacked. So that reduces your defense, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about battles. But you can, instead of fortifying a city when that upgrade defenses comes up, you can repair 1 city at a cost of 2 crowns per breach. So if you had a breach token on there, you could pay 2 crowns to remove it. Alright, another neutral action card you might draw is the muster forces. Barons may remove 1 or more casualty tokens from a single noble at a cost of 2 crowns per token. Again, we'll talk more about casualty tokens when we talk about battles, but if you had a noble who had casualties on it, like this one, -100, which basically reduces your troop strength by 100, you can pay, when this comes up, pay 2 crowns to remove each casualty token on a single noble. And the final neutral action card that may come up is Shuffle the Fate deck, and that's exactly what it says. You pick up the Fate deck, shuffle it, and put it back down. Now, normally I think I've mentioned whenever you draw a Fate card, after you've resolved it, you just put it face down underneath the Fate deck, but when this card is drawn, you shuffle the Fate deck and then put it back. So now I think we should go ahead and talk about the special phases. So I've mentioned as you draw and resolve your action cards, they say which of the special phase areas they go into, either the taxation, assembly, or wages. When one of these areas has a number of cards in it that equals twice the number of players. So in a 3-player game, when the 6th card is put into that location, then that special phase is carried out. So in the taxation phase, when the 6th card is placed in there, then you do the taxation special phase, and basically, as I kind of already mentioned, for every city that you control, you collect the amount of crowns that it shows under that city. Again, if it's fortified, you'd get an extra one. So if the red player controlled this, he would get 3 crowns. And you do that for every city you control on the board. All the players do that. So each player collects crowns for each city that they control. A player may also have a concession like this, wine concession, that, for instance, this one you receive 2 crowns each taxation phase. So you would receive the 2 crowns from that, as well as from your cities, whenever a taxation special phase is resolved. I'll talk more about how you get these concessions here in just a minute. But so once everybody's collected their income from taxation, then all the cards that are in the taxation special phase are returned to their player. Now remember, that would be 6 cards, because that in a 3-player game, because it's that special phase occurs when the number of cards in there that equals twice the number of players. All right, we'll talk about the wages phase next, a special phase next. Again, when a number of cards are placed into the wages special phase area that equals twice the number of players, so 6 cards in a 3-player game. When the 6th card is placed there, you'll carry out the wage special phase. So this is when you have to pay wages to your troops. So starting with the chairman of the assembly, he'll pay wages to his troops, and then each player going in clockwise order will then have to pay wages to their troops. Now you must pay all your regular troops first, and they show any troops that are assigned to your nobles or your stronghold must be paid. Even if that noble is not on the board, you still have to pay troops assigned to him. And if even if that noble has casualties, has a casualty token on him, for those troops, all the troops still have to be paid. So again, you pay all your regular troops first, and so you would have to pay 1 crown for this one, 1 crown for this one, 1 crown for this one, and 2 crowns for that one. So if you can afford to pay that, then you pay crowns back to the supply for all your regular troops. Then if you still have enough money, then you pay your mercenary troops. So like the English, that would pay 1, that would pay 2. Now if you don't have enough money or don't want to pay your mercenary troops, any that you don't pay immediately desert you and get shuffled back into the mercenary deck. If you don't have enough money to pay your regular troops, they don't desert you, but you have to pay any that you can pay first, and then any you can't pay would still stay with you. So you pay your regular troops first, then if you have money left over, you pay your mercenary troops. And if you can't pay your mercenary troops, they desert. Each baron does have a noble, like this one, that says does not pay wages for troops if army size is under 450. So his army size is only 100, so he would not have to pay these troops when you're doing the wages phase, and any troops under that, as long as it doesn't go over 450. This does not include the 200 bonus here that's shown on the noble card. I'll talk more about what that is for when we get into battles, but you only count the value of the actual troops assigned under this card. And each baron has this, so this guy has this one has this one. So as long as your troop size totals under 450, like this one's only 150, he would not have to pay wages to those troops when resolving the wages special phase. And again, once everybody's paid all the wages that they can, then all the cards that are here go back to their players and go back into their deck. So the last special phase here is the assembly. Again, when twice the number of cards is in the assembly space, then there are a number of players. So again, in a 3-player game, when the 6th card is placed there, you immediately have an assembly. So all the barons must attend the assembly unless for some reason they can't due to a card effect or they've been banned from the assembly, which we'll talk about, how you get banned from the assembly later. But in most cases, all the barons will attend the assembly. So the first thing you'll do is each baron will receive 1 vote when the assembly is convened. Then they'll receive an additional vote for every kingdom city that they control. So not the overseas cities, but the kingdom cities. So for every kingdom city they control, they get an additional vote. Then if for some reason the current chairman of the assembly can't attend for some reason because of a card effect or he's banned or something, then you would appoint a temporary chairman of the assembly. But most cases, whoever is currently the chairman of the assembly will remain the chairman and is attending the assembly. Then you look at your agenda cards. If there's any private motions up there, then those would be voted on first. In this case, there's not. So the chairman of the assembly gathers the 3 agenda cards, decides the order they'll be voted on, and reads each of them out loud in the order that they're going to be voted on. And then, starting with the first one, you will have a vote for that agenda. So in this example, maybe the chairman of the assembly decides that we'll vote on the office for keeper of the keys. Now, an office is something that if a baron wins the vote for that, they take that office and assign it to their one of their nobles. A noble can only ever have 1 office at a time. If they were to receive another office, then they would have to discard their previously held office. But this one, what it does, the keeper of the keys, gives whichever noble is holding that 50 troops that they don't have to pay. It's 15 maintained troops, or 50 maintained troops that can be assigned to a noble, and they don't have to be paid in the wages phase. So that would be the first agenda that's up for vote. So when you're voting for agenda, players will take all the votes that they have into their hand, and then they can they'll hold out in their hand a number of those votes that they want to bid for that certain agenda. Then once everybody is holding out their votes, they reveal, and starting with the chairman of the assembly, each player will declare how they're voting. So for instance, if you're voting for this, you probably are voting for your baron to receive that agenda so they can assign it to one of their nobles. But it's possible you could be voting for another baron if they said they would give you some money or something to vote for them. So anyway, everybody reveals, starting with the chairman of the assembly, how they are voting, either for them or for another baron for this type of agenda. And then whoever has the most votes cast for them then takes that office and assigns it to one of their nobles. All votes that are cast, even if they were not the winning vote, are then put back into the supply, and the player no longer has those votes. Then you would go on, the chairman would again read aloud the next agenda that he has up for bid. So for instance, this one is a charge. You'll see it says charge here. So a charge will be held by a baron. A baron can have up to 3 charges. If he would ever receive a 4th charge, he can discard a charge he held previously, but not the new charge. So, for instance, this one, banned from office. You may never be chairman of the assembly or head of the church. If you are chairman of the assembly, you lose it to the baron next highest number of votes. If you're head of the church, you lose it to the baron with the next highest number of faith. Break ties randomly. Anyway, so in this case, players would vote for a baron that they want to be banned from office, from holding one of those offices. So you would, again, take in a number of votes that you have, hold them in your hand, however many you want to bid for that vote, then reveal, and starting with the chairman of the assembly, to say who you are voting for. The person who has the most votes voted against them in this case would then have to take that charge and be banned from office. And there's also laws that would affect everybody that can be voted on, and motions. So there, besides voting for a certain baron, there's also some agendas that may be a yes or a no vote. Again, that may be a law that's going to affect everybody for the rest of the game or something like that. In any case, all 3 agendas are voted on and resolved or assigned, and then that will end the assembly. Then the last thing, 3 new agenda cards will be revealed and placed up here on the current agendas, and those will be voted on the next time the assembly special area holds 6 cards. And so once you've finished doing all the agendas, then all these cards in the assembly area are returned to the players who owns them. I did mention that one of the types of assembly cards that may be up there is a private motion, and those are always voted on first. If private motion is there, you'll draw a fate card, and whichever baron it reveals, that is the baron who gets to propose a private motion. The types of motions that baron can propose are to rescind the ban on a baron that's currently banned from the assembly, or to discard a law or a charge or an office that somebody currently has. Or that baron can look through the discard pile and choose an agenda in that discard pile and propose a vote on that. Or they can just vote to postpone the assembly, make a private motion to postpone the assembly until the assembly special area has another 6 cards in it. In which case the current cards would still be returned to their players, but the other 3 agendas would just stay there and not be voted on until the next assembly was held. So those are the different private motions that somebody can propose if private motion is one of the agendas there. And I had mentioned concessions when we were talking about taxation. That's a way that somebody gets concession. That's an agenda. It's a charge that can be voted on. So you can vote on a baron to receive that charge, and then they have that concession. So again, that's how you get those. So talk real quick about some of the ways you can be banned from the assembly. If a charge or office is voted to be given to you and you refuse it, you can refuse it, but then you'll be permanently banned from the assembly. If a law has been implemented from a previous assembly and you refuse to obey that law, then you will be permanently banned from the assembly. I think that covers most of the reasons why you may be banned. So if you're banned for the entire game unless somebody proposes a private motion to rescind that ban. So you may, pay somebody money to propose that private motion for you to try to get you back into the assembly or something. But anyway, that's how you can get banned. All right, let's talk about the mercenary draft. I mentioned whenever a number of Baron tokens are on the mercenary draft track, that is one more than the number of players. So in this case, when the fourth Baron token is placed on the mercenary draft track, you will have a mercenary draft. So when you have the mercenary draft, starting with whichever Baron is first on the draft track, they will have an opportunity to draft one of the available mercenaries, paying the cost is shown, where their wage is. So the blue player here would have the first opportunity. So maybe he wants this 150 Romanians. He would have to pay 3 crowns to the supply. Then he could take those mercenaries. You must immediately assign them to a noble. You can assign them to a noble that is in one of that baron's cities, or to a noble that's in that baron's in the same area as that baron's stronghold, or you can just assign them to the stronghold, or you can assign them to a noble that is currently off the board for whatever reason. But you can't assign them to a noble who is just out in an area, or in an area that is not in one of those locations. So this player, could not assign it to this blue noble, to this his square noble, because he's not in an area with a city he controls. Whereas if the noble was here in his stronghold area, then he could assign it to that noble. Or he could assign them to this circle noble, because he's in a city that baron controls. So he would be able to assign them here to this circle noble by just slipping them under there, like so. Or you can, as I mentioned, you can always just assign them to your stronghold, whether there's a noble there or not. So then the next player, baron on the track, he would have the opportunity to recruit one of the remaining mercenaries, and then the next player, and so on. So if you have 2 of your baron markers on the track, you'll have 2 opportunities to recruit mercenaries. There is a special circumstance if there are 2 or more mercenaries of the same nationality available, and you have more than one baron marker on the track. Like in this example, when it was this guy's turn to recruit, he's the first to recruit, and he has another baron marker on there. Because there's 2 mercenaries of the same nationality, he could say that he's going to recruit both of those, and pay the cost to recruit both of them, and then he would take both of his markers off. He would not have another opportunity. So, normally it goes in order. This guy would get to recruit one, then this guy would get to recruit one, then this guy would get to recruit another one, then this guy. However, if there's 2 or more of the same nationality, and you've got 2 or more of your markers in the mercenary draft, when it comes your turn, you could recruit, in this case, he could recruit both of those since he has 2 on there, and then it would come to the blue player, and he would have to recruit one of the remaining ones, or have the opportunity, and then this guy would not get to recruit again because he's already taken the 2 for that. Then the green player would get to recruit one. Once all the recruiting is done, then all the tokens are returned to their players. I guess it's not really recruiting the mercenaries, it's hiring the mercenaries. So if some were hired and some were left, because when it comes your turn, if your token's on there and you decide you don't want to hire any mercenaries, you don't have to. So some, one or more, will usually be left once the mercenary draft is over and their tokens are returned to their player. Any remaining mercenaries are shuffled back into the mercenary deck, and then four more mercenaries are, well, one more than the number of players are dealt back out. Again, in a 3-player game, that would be 4. All right, I want to talk about battles next, I think, but before I do that, I did forget to mention a couple of things when I was talking about movement. If a noble starts an area with one of these ports, plays a movement, uh, plays a card such as Mobilize Forces that allows him to move, so he can move an unexhausted noble in an area that has a port to any other area that has a port. So either one of the overseas areas or one of these. So maybe this guy, he wants to move to Jerusalem. When you do that, you spend your 1 move to move. You just put yourself in the port area of your destination. You're not actually in that area yet. You're just in the port area. And then in the upkeep phase, when we talk about that, you'll see that you actually, at that point, then move your noble into that area. And the one other thing I wanted to mention about movement is it is possible to transfer troops during movement. So we'll just say maybe this guy was here and this guy was here. You can, during your movement, so maybe this guy's trying to move to Lens here. So he can do that since it's all on a road. He can move 3 spaces. When moving through an area with one of your unexhausted nobles, you can transfer troops from them to you. So he could transfer from that circle, maybe he could take those 50 regular troops and go ahead and put that with his 50 regular troops and continue movement. Again, that's as long as that person was unexhausted. And then you can also transfer troops from your stronghold. So when he continued his movement, he could then take these 50 Swiss troops and also move them, attach them to him, to himself, and continue his movement onto land. So he would end up there with a lot more troops. So you can transfer troops from your stronghold or another unexhausted noble during your movement. Of course, if you're not on a road and just moving 1 movement, then yeah, you could move in there and then transfer troops from this guy to this guy, but then that guy couldn't move any further. All right, so let's talk about battles. You can start a battle if you have a Mobilize Forces card. Remember, you can move and start a battle, so you can move in here and start a battle, this guy, or if you had moved in there on a previous turn, or he had moved in there on a previous turn, and then it was your turn, you could play a Mobilize Forces or a versatile strategy card. So you can always start a battle if you've moved in or start in an area that has an opposing noble or a neutral city or an opposing noble city or opposing baron city or an opposing baron stronghold, and you play a Mobilize Forces or a versatile strategy card, you can start a battle. The player taking the action is the attacker. The other player is the defender, and only 2 barons can ever be involved in a battle at the same time. So if maybe this green noble was here and blue moved in here and said he was starting a battle, he could only pick one of those nobles to battle against. He couldn't pick both the red baron and the green baron. So you can only battle against one other baron. Now, if these 2 nobles were already in here and hadn't been in a battle, and then blue moved one of his other nobles in there and said he's starting a battle, then both of these nobles could be involved in the battle as long as this previous noble was not already exhausted. But if this guy was not exhausted and he moved in there and said he was starting a battle, then both these nobles could be involved in the battle. Or the blue guy could decide that this guy, even though he's in there, is not going to participate in the battle, and so then he would not be able to contribute his troop strength, but he also wouldn't be able to take any casualties in only the two that were involved. If a baron has more than one noble in an area and another noble moves in there and attacks, all the defending nobles must be involved in the battle. And again, even if these nobles were exhausted, since they're the defenders, they still get to fight in the battle, even though they were exhausted. So even if you're defending in a battle, even if your noble's exhausted, you still participate with your troops in the battle. But let's just show in a battle between one noble against another. As long as the defender is not in a city he controls, then it's considered an open field battle. So first, each noble will declare their commander. If there's only one noble of each type, then the noble is obviously the commander of that battle. If one baron had more than one noble in there, he would declare which one was. If he had more than one noble participating in the battle, he would declare which one is commanding, and then their bonus. Each noble has a bonus of 200. Only those will get used by the commanding noble. Any noble that's not commanding, his bonus will not count, though his troops still will. But in this case, we're just talking about two nobles, so they are both the commanding nobles. So each noble will get to draw one fate card for every 100 troops that they have. So for instance, in this case, we got the square blue noble, which is Roger of Vice. He has 150 troops, so you get to draw one fate card for every 100. So he only gets to draw one fate card for that. So he would draw that. Then you also get to, for your command ability, for your commander, you get to draw two more fate cards. But because those are not troops that you're drawing for, that 200 bonus represents like your leadership ability. So even though you get to draw those additional two fate cards, you have to discard two. So you look at all the fate cards you drew, and then you have to discard two. So you'll be looking in this area: one victory, deal 100 casualties, prevent 100 casualties. So he has to discard two, so maybe he's going to discard the deal 100 casualties and the prevent 100 casualties. You don't reveal yet the card that you're going to, or cards that you're going to play. You keep those to yourself for now. Discard these two. The defending player, the red circle noble, he has 200 troops, so he gets to draw two fate cards for that, plus the 200 for his noble, so two more, and then he has to look at those and discard two. So again, he got a deal 100, one victory, another one victory, and a draw one fate. So we'll say he's going to discard this draw one fate and this deal 100 casualties, and he'll keep his two victories. Again, he doesn't reveal those to the other player at this time. Once both players are ready, they reveal their cards. If one of them was to draw a fate card, then you get to draw another fate card, whichever player had that. Then you tally casualties. This guy just got to prevent 100 casualties. So if the red player had chosen one that said deal 100 casualties, then the prevent 100 casualties would block that. In this case, he's just preventing 100 casualties. He's not dealing any casualties. If you are dealt casualties, like if this player, maybe instead of having these 2 victories, he had dealt 200 casualties, well, this guy could prevent 100, but then he would have to take another 100 casualties, so he would have to take a casualty token and put it on his Baron. So he has 150 troops, so he is not killed. If you ever have to take more casualties than you have troop, then your noble dies. If your noble is ever killed because he takes more casualties than the number of troops he has, if he has any mercenaries, first thing you'll do is draw 1 fate card, and if it reveals the same nationality of mercenaries that noble has, then those mercenaries are lost and get shuffled back into the mercenary deck. But only one of those, if you had 2 of those same mercenary type cards with that noble that was killed, only one of them would go back to the mercenary deck. The other one would stay. But then you have to discard a number of a value of mercenaries. For every casualty token you have, you've got to discard 100 worth of mercenaries. So in this case, if this guy had been killed with casualties, he would have to discard, these 100 mercenaries. So you'd have to discard 100 worth of mercenaries for every casualty token you took. Your regular soldiers or troops stay with you. Then all your casualty tokens are removed, and that noble piece is removed from the board and placed off of the board with his regular troops. Then that noble can come back onto the board later as the heir of the noble that was killed. Later in the upkeep phase, that noble can be brought back onto the board. But as in our example here, where no casualties were taken, or if a baron took some casualties but not enough to kill him, then you go on to the next step, which is to count victories. Now in this case, the blue baron has no victories. However, the red baron got 2 victories. If a baron has at least 2 more victories than the other baron, which is what happened in this case, then the baron that had the more victories got a full victory and kills the other noble, and so then you would perform a noble death like I just talked about a few seconds ago. If, however, they only got 1 more victory, like if this player had only received 1 victory card, or if this guy had got 1 victory and this guy had got 2 victories, then he would only have 1 victory more than him, so that would be a partial victory. So if you get a partial victory against a noble, then that noble has to retreat. First thing you'll do is draw a fate card and reveal the nationality of mercenaries. If that noble that's retreating has mercenaries of that nationality in his army, he must choose one of his mercenary troops of that nationality that abandon him and get shuffled back into the mercenary deck. Then that retreating noble must be moved to an adjacent area that does not contain another baron's noble or city. If there is no such area where that noble can retreat to, then he is exhausted and moved to that noble's stronghold. if that noble stronghold happens to be under siege, which we haven't talked about sieges yet, but if that noble stronghold is under siege or currently off the board, then instead this guy would just be, that noble would be killed and die like how we talked about previously. One other thing I failed to mention when we were showing our battle example here, your noble that is involved in the battle may have a special power, like for instance here the blue square noble. Well, he's got a power that he can prevent 100 casualties in battle. So he could have kept one of his other cards, like the one victory, instead of using this one, since he already had a prevent 100 casualties in battle. Or he could have used them both in case he thought he was going to get, a couple of hundred casualties in battles. But anyway, I failed to mention when we were talking about the battle example that you should take into account the special power of your noble that's involved in the battle. The red circle noble that was involved in the battle, he didn't have one that pertained to the battle. His is just the one that doesn't, he does not pay wages for his troops if they're under 450 strength. But if you have more than one noble involved in the battle, as I mentioned previously, at the beginning of the battle you have to just choose which one is your commander for that battle, and only his special ability and his plus 200 that allows you to draw 2 cards are taken into account. The other noble's troops are involved in the battle if you say that he's involved, but his noble's special ability and plus 200 for drawing cards does not count toward that battle. Alright, so now we should talk about another type of attack, attacking a city. For instance here, the blue noble is in the same area as one of his cities here, Balin, and we'll say the green noble uses immobilized forces to move in there and attack. Now, whenever a noble is in the same area as one of his cities and he is attacked, he is considered to be in the city. So the city's defenses will count toward his troop strength count. You can see it has a defense of 1 or 100. Now, just to mention, if there happened to be another noble in there as well, and the green noble moved in there to attack blue, he would have to get permission from the red noble in order to do that. But we'll just move this guy back here for now and say green moved in there with immobilized forces, so he's attacking this noble, and because he's in an area with the city he controls, he's considered to be in that city. So now it works very similar to how we just talked about, where both nobles would draw cards equal to their troop strength, but in addition the blue noble would get to draw an extra card, because he has a city defense strength of 100. If he was in a city like Lens, he would get to draw 4 extra cards because its defense strength is 400. And if this city was fortified like this, it has a plus 100 strength, so he would get to draw 2 extra cards. Alright, so again, when you're attacking a city, you actually have 2 options. You can assault the city, in which case you'll immediately have a battle similar, as I was saying, to when you're just battling another noble, where each side will draw fate cards equal to their troop strength, but then the defending noble will also get to draw a fate card equal to his city's strength. And then it works the same. You deal casualties and prevent casualties, and you have your +1 victory results. However, when the defender gets casualties dealt to him, he can allocate some of those casualties to his city. So if he got a card played on him from the attacker that says, that he got inflicted 100 casualties, then he could decide to assign that to his troops, or he can put a breach token on his city, and every breach token represents 100 casualties. So for this city, he could only put one breach token on there, because once it's met its strength, its defense value, then that's all the casualties that could be assigned to that city. Any future casualties he took would have to be assigned to that noble. But if he had a city like Linz that could take 400 casualties, then up to 4 breach tokens could be assigned there. And the bad thing about the breach tokens is, even if the attacking player ends up winning the battle and taking over, capturing the city, any breach tokens that were assigned to it would remain. And then until those breach tokens were removed by an upgrade defenses neutral action card, then that city would provide less bonus if it were attacked in the future than it did. For each breach token, it would reduce the defense of it by 100. So if an attacker assaults the city, he can capture the city if he deals enough casualties to reduce the city's defense to 0, as well as kill the opposing noble by dealing enough casualties to him where he has more casualties than he has troops. Or he can also capture the city if he achieves a full or partial victory, as we showed earlier, by getting one or more victory results than the opponent did on his fate cards. And if a player captures a city, then he just replaces the old control marker with his control marker. Another way to capture a city, when you attack, if this player used mobilized forces to move in here and start an attack against that city, instead of assaulting the city, he could siege the city. Now, you're allowed to siege the city if your total strength, so your troop strength plus your 200 for your commanding nobles bonus, is greater than the troop strength and command bonus and city strength of the city. So in this case, the green star noble, he's got a strength of 150 plus 50, so 202 troops plus his 200 bonus. So he's got a strength of 400. Whereas the blue circle noble, which is this guy, has only a strength of 250 plus 100 for his city strength, so it's 350. So because the green noble that's attacking has 400, his strength is greater, so then he is allowed to siege the city. If you begin a siege, you take a siege marker and put it in that area. As long as this city and noble are under siege, the defending noble cannot move. He can't receive any troops, like via mercenary draft or transfer. The only thing he could do, he could on his turn, if he was not exhausted, he could, if he played a mobilized forces or a versatile strategy card, he could attack that besieging noble. But if he did so, it would be an open field battle, and he would not get the benefit of the defense value of his city. Now, another noble could move in there and attack that noble and defeat him or run him off. If that, made him retreat, if that happened, then the siege would be lifted. But if the siege is not lifted because this noble is defeated or run off for any reason, or doesn't move off on his own, then on the next round, not on this same round, but on the next round, when he's unexhausted again, if his strength is still greater than that of the defending noble and city, then he can siege the city for a second time. And if he does that, then he gains control of the city. And the defending noble in the city immediately dies. So that's a way to capture a city without the problem of having it take any breaches. And so when you capture it whole and it's not damaged. A player can attack a neutral city that doesn't belong to another player, kind of following the same rules. If there was another baron in that area, he would have to get permission from the other baron before he could attack it. But if not, he attacks it in the same way, but the city only gets to draw a number of cards equal to its strength. So in this case, this neutral city would just get to draw one fate card. Of course, it doesn't have any commanding noble or anything to give it an extra 2 to draw. So it would be the same. You could attack it or siege it. So it would all work just the same as what I described as attacking another player's city, only there's no other noble to add his leadership bonus or troop strength bonus. The only strength would be the defense value of the city that is being attacked or assaulted or sieged. And attacking another player's stronghold is just the same. You can attack it if there's no other noble, no defending noble in there, then it just gets its strength of 400, so it would draw 4 cards. But of course, if there's a defending noble, then he gets to add his troop strength and command bonus, where he gets to draw 2 extra cards. But of course, he's got to discard 2 as well. So it works exactly the same thing. You can siege it or assault it. If you do manage to capture another baron's stronghold, then you immediately gain half of their crowns, rounded down. They also have to give you one of the cities they control on the board, their choice, which one. That stronghold is removed from the board, and that baron who lost his stronghold will not gain any influence during the upkeep phase, which we haven't talked about that phase yet, but just keep in mind they will not gain any influence during the upkeep phase. And then that defeated baron will be allowed to place his stronghold back on the board during the upkeep phase, just as with this, following the same rules that he placed it at the beginning of the game, where it can't be placed where any unraised cities are or where any other baron's nobles are. Alright, I think that pretty much covers most of battles. If you watch the example rounds, I'll probably show some more battles in full. But anyway, so in the actions phase, we'll get back to the actions phase now. So the chairman of the assembly. So getting back to the actions phase now, the chairman of the assembly will, draw the action cards from each deck until the third action card area is empty. Once that last action and any special action phases are resolved after the last card in the third action space is drawn, that will end the actions phase, and then you go to the upkeep phase. First thing you'll do in the upkeep phase is check for victory. If any baron owns more than half of the unraised cities in the kingdom, so not including the overseas cities, more than half the unraised cities in the kingdom, then he immediately wins the game. Next, each baron will take an amount of influence from the influence pool for each city that he controls. If it's later in the game and the influence pool is almost empty and a baron still needs if it's drawn empty but a baron still needs to draw additional influence, he can use it from some of the influence that was not added to the influence pool. But in that case, once the influence pool is empty, at this time, whoever has the most influence will win the game. And remember that if a baron's stronghold is off the board, he can't gain any influence here in the upkeep phase. And any of a baron's cities that are under siege do not generate influence. Next, you'll check for revolts. And to do that, you'll look for any baron's city that he controls that does not have one of his nobles in it. For instance, like this one, the green player controls Simlik, but he has no noble in there, so he has to check for a revolt. You do that by drawing an influence card and look in this area. As you can see, this one does say revolt. So if that happens, the influence marker or the control marker for that city is immediately removed. The other option is it may say no revolt, in which case nothing happens to that city. Now, a baron can, if he drew for a city that didn't have one of his nobles and he did get the revolt result, instead of letting it go back to neutral by removing his control marker, he can instead pay one faith from his supply to keep the city, or pay twice the city's income in crowns to keep the city. So in this case, this player green could either play one faith, which he doesn't have, but he could pay 4 crowns, and then the city would remain his instead of going back to neutral. Alright, the next thing that happens in the upkeep phase is any players that had made a move from a port to another sea area. We had talked about when you first do that, you get placed just in the port area of the area you're going to. So at this point in the upkeep phase, you go ahead and then arrive into that area, and now you're considered to be in that area. Alright, the next thing, the upkeep phase, is barons get to refresh any nobles that had moved or attacked during the round. You know that whenever you move or attack with a noble, that exhausts them, and they're not allowed to move or attack any further in the round. So at this point, you get to refresh your nobles that had moved or attacked, and they go back to their unexhausted side. And finally, in the upkeep phase, you can return nobles to the board. So nobles that had previously been killed and they're off the board, their heir gets to return, or if you had not placed a noble on the board at the beginning of the game, or at some point because it had no troops, or if your noble was taken off the board for some other game effect. At this point in the upkeep phase, you can return nobles to the board. When returning nobles to the board, you start with the chairman of the assembly. He does that first, if he has any, and then continuing clockwise, players will have the opportunity to return any nobles that they have off the board to the board. So first thing, if you have more than one noble off the board and they have troops assigned to them, before assigning back to the board, you can transfer troops from among nobles who are off the board to each other, assign them however you wish. Or also, if you have troops under your stronghold card that are at your stronghold, those can also now be assigned to troops that are currently off the board. Finally, any off the board nobles that now have troops assigned to them must now be placed on the board either at that baron's stronghold or at any city he controls, as long as that city is not under siege. And whew, I think that finally covers all the rules. Now, I just wanted to mention a few times I've said you can offer other players money, bargain with them by offering them money to take certain actions. So you can always promise to do things and exchange money for something you want a player, to try to bribe a player to do for you. But you can never actually trade votes or influence or faith tokens or troops or anything like that. The only thing you can actually exchange uh, is currency, crowns, and of course you can make promises of actions you're going to take and that kind of thing. Of course, those are not binding. You can't exchange if you have an office or a charge, like this. You can't exchange that with somebody else for some favor. Again, the only thing you can actually exchange is crowns, and then just asking favors or exchanging crowns or favors, or if you do this, I'll do that for you. But again, those things aren't binding. But I think that covers all the rules. That was a whole lot, and I don't know that I explained it very well. So I'm going to try to go, this video is already pretty long. I'm going to try to go through one example round, and then hopefully we'll wrap it up. Alright, I think I've got the game back to how I had it right after I did setup. So we're ready to start with the planning phase. So again, this is where each player will decide which two cards he's going to want to play in each of the action spaces. So on camera, I'll just kind of say what I think what the blue player is going to do, and then off camera I'll do the red and green player. So blue player's got some nobles up here in the city of Kovel and Balin. They both just have a strength of 100. His star noble has a strength of 50 troops, but 200 for his noble there, so 250. So I think what he's going to do is siege those two cities. So he's going to want to play some mobilized forces and or versatile strategy cards. So I think these are the cards he's going to play. So in action space 1, he's going to put a mobilize forces and draft soldiers. In action space 2, he's going to put a levy taxes and rally support. And in action space 3, he's going to put serve the church and a versatile strategy. And now I'll go ahead and have the green and red player choose and place their two cards in each of those spaces. Alright, so green and red have allocated theirs. Now the chairman of the assembly will take the neutral action cards. He'll shuffle them up and deal 2 into each of these piles. Alright, he's dealt 2 neutral action cards in each of these piles. Now the chairman of the assembly will shuffle each of these piles, or he can ask some of the other players, he'll shuffle one and ask the other players to shuffle the other 2 just to get it done faster. So let me get that done. Alright, so each of the decks and the action spaces have been shuffled up. So that's going to end the planning phase. Now we go to the actions phase. The chairman of the assembly will reveal the first card in action space 1. It's green player's card, so green player will resolve it. He'll gain 2 votes. And then if he has more votes than any other baron, he becomes chairman of the assembly. He does, because none of the other barons have any votes. So now green player becomes chairman of the assembly. And then he'll place this card into the assembly area. Now the green player being chairman of the assembly, now he would draw the next card off of the action space 1 instead of the blue player who had been chairman of the assembly. So green player will draw this card. Oh, it's blue's card. So blue would resolve this. Draft soldiers. Place one of your Baron markers on the mercenary track for free. So he can place one. Now he can place it in any of these 4 spaces here since it's a 3-player game. But he'll just go ahead because he wants to be first. Remember, when you do draft the mercenaries, it's in order from left to right. He wants to be first, so he's going to place it there. And then this is red and says wages, so that will go into the wages special area. Now the chairman of the assembly will draw the next card, which is also blue's card, mobilize forces. So blue will resolve this how he sees fit. So blue could, with this card, choose an area and move, and or then start a battle. He's not going to move, he's just going to start a battle up here where he has a noble in Kovel. So he's going to attack that city, but instead of assaulting it, he's just going to siege it. Again, he can do it because it's only got a strength of 100, and his star noble has a strength of 50 with his troops plus his command bonus there of 200. So he does have more strength than the city, so he can siege it. So he's going to now, because he's doing an attack, he's going to exhaust that noble and place a siege token there, showing that he's sieging that city. And now, since he only used this to start a battle instead of moving, he puts it in the assembly area. So now we have 2 cards in the assembly area. The green player, now still being chairman of the assembly, resolves the next, or draws the next card, which is red's card. So now he has the opportunity to gain 2 crowns, gain a vote, move a noble, or start a battle, or place one of his Baron markers. What he's going to do is start a battle, and I think he'll do that up here in Benak. He'll start a battle there. That is his triangle noble, who has a strength of 250 against that city's strength of just 100. So he's going to start a siege there as well. So he will put a siege token, and now his noble is exhausted. His triangle noble is exhausted. And this card, because it's versatile strategy, instead of going into one of the special areas, just goes back into his hand of cards. Alright, the green player, being chairman of the assembly, will now draw the next card. It's a neutral card. Each baron may spend 4 crowns to fortify a city or repair one city at a cost of 2 crowns. Well, nobody owns a city yet or has a damaged city, so this one really pretty worthless at this point. So it's just going to go back into the hand of neutral action cards. And now the green player will reveal the next card, which is another neutral action card. The chairman of the assembly can start an expedition, an empty expedition if he wants. And then each baron can invest up to 5. Green's the chairman of the assembly, so he decides if he wants to start an expedition. And he says, yeah, he's going to start a Spice Islands expedition. So he's going to perk the marker on the 1. Now the other barons decide whether they want to invest. Well, starting with the chairman. So yeah, he says he's going to invest. He'll invest 3 crowns in this expedition. So he puts his marker on 3 crowns. Then going clockwise, we'll say this player says he's just going to invest 2 crowns. And the red player, he's brave, he's going to invest 5 crowns. You can invest up to 5. Then the head of the church can pay 1 faith if he wants to bless it. Unfortunately, he has no faith tokens currently, so he can't bless it. So this expedition has started. There's no other ones to advance currently, so now this card just goes back into the deck of neutral action cards. Alright, chairman of the assembly will resolve or reveal this card. It actually belongs to him. Draft soldiers, so he gets to place one of his markers on the mercenary draft track. He's going to place it there. And then this will go into the wages area of the special special area on the board there. Alright, now that action space 1 is empty, so now we start with action space 2. Again, the chairman will reveal the top card. That belongs to blue. He got to levy taxes, gain 1 crown for each area that contains one of his nobles. His nobles are in 1, 2, 3, 4 areas, so he'll gain 4 crowns. 2, 3, 4. Puts that in his area. And now this card will go into the taxation area. Next card will be revealed. It is a neutral action card, muster forces. Barons may remove 1 or more casualties. Nobody has any casualties, so that's kind of useless at this point. We'll go on to the next card. Another neutral action cards. The head of the church chooses a baron to resolve the top event card. Okay, the head of the church is the red player. The top event card is blue, so that's probably going to be one that affects everybody. So he'll just draw that one himself. Alright, good trade winds. Immediately move all trading fleets 1 space forward, then draw and resolve fake cards for any fleets that are on space 3. Well, this one won't make it to space 3, but it does go to space 2. And now this event card just gets discarded, and this neutral action card goes back into the hand of neutral action cards, and the chairman of the assembly will now draw the next card. It's green. Serve the church, so he gains 1 faith here. Then, if you have more faith than any other baron, become head of the church. Well, he does, because none of the other barons have any faith. So now he's both head of the church and chairman of the assembly. And then he gets to choose wherever he wants to place this card. He's going to place it in the taxation. Alright, chairman draws the next card. It belongs to him. Gain 2 votes. So he gains another 2 votes. And then if he has more votes than any other baron, he becomes chairman of the assembly. Well, he does have more votes than any other baron, and he already is chairman of the assembly. And now this just goes into the assembly area. Another card is resolved. This is Red's card. He gains 1 crown for each area that contains one of his nobles. His nobles are in 4 different areas, so he'll gain 4 crowns. And then this will go into the taxation area. So now there's 3 cards in there. Alright, the next card is drawn. That belongs to blue. Rally support, so he gains 2 votes. Well, alright, then if he has more votes than any other baron, well, he doesn't, because he's only got 2, but green has 4. Red has none, so he does not become chairman of the assembly, but this does go into the assembly area. That places a 4th card there. And now we're on to the 3rd stack. So the chairman will resolve this. He gains 1 faith. So now he gains another faith. And if he has more faith than any other baron, become head of the church. Well, he does have more faith, and he already is head of the church, so now he gets to decide where this goes. He's going to put that in the he'll put that in the wages area. Alright, now he draws the next card. That belongs to blue, versatile strategy. I think he's going to use that to start a battle. So normally, I mean, in real life, I would probably just siege this city again, but I want to show a battle here. So he's going to use this to start a battle with his yellow noble, or not yellow, circle noble, who is here in Balin. So he's going to start a battle there. He's going to attack that city, and he's going to assault it instead of sieging it. So he has a total of 150 plus 200 for his leadership bonus, so he gets to draw 1 fake card. And then he gets to draw 2 for his leader bonus, but then he'll have to discard 2 after he looks at them. So he's going to look at what he drew. So he got a deal 100 casualties, a 1 victory, and a 1 victory. Well, he doesn't want to damage that city if he doesn't have to, so he's going to keep his 1 victory, and he'll discard these 2 fake cards. So they get discarded at the bottom here. Now the city, just having a strength of 100, gets to draw 1 fake card. So now they reveal him. Okay, his fake card is a draw 1 fake card, so he just draws another fake card. So his is a prevent 100 casualties, and this player's is a 1 victory. So no casualties are dealt to anybody. Circle special powers, just not to pay wages, so he doesn't have anything other than that. But when you're attacking, assaulting a city, when you're assaulting the city, you can capture it if you reduce its strength to 0 and any defending nobles troop counts to 0. But of course there is no defending nobles here. So I didn't reduce its strength to 0, but you also capture it if you receive a full or partial victory. Remember, a full victory is if you get 2 or more victories than the opponent. A partial victory is if you got 1 or more victories than the opponent. He did get 1 victory. The opponent got no victories. So it's a partial victory. So he does go ahead and capture that, and didn't do any damage to it, so it doesn't have any breach tokens, so that's pretty good. And then these fake cards are just put to the bottom of the fate deck. And of course this guy's exhausted for starting a battle, and now his versatile strategy card just goes back into his hand. Alright, Chairman of the Assembly will now draw the next card. That is a neutral event card. The head of the church charges a top event card. Okay, so it's a green backed event card, so if that's going to be a good card for whoever draws it, likely. So the head of the church, if he wants to draw that card himself, he has to pay 1 faith, or he can just choose one of the other barons to draw that card. But the head of the church thinks he wants to draw that himself, so he's going to pay 1 faith. He's got 2, and he will draw that card himself. And it says, stirring speech, refresh 1 of your nobles. Well, that's not really beneficial to him because he doesn't have any nobles that have been exhausted at this point. So I don't think that was worth 1 faith to him, but it is what it is. Alright, Chairman of the Assembly draws the next card. That happens to be for him. Draft soldiers. Place 1 of your markers on the mercenary track, so he will do that. Again for free. And now that goes in the wages. So now we have 4 cards in the wages. Alright, draw the next card. That's blues. Serve the church. Gain 1 faith. So he will gain a faith. Then if he has more faith than any other baron, he becomes head of the church. Well, he doesn't have more. He's got equal to the current head of the church, but not more. So then he does not become head of the church, and he decides he can put this in anyone. He'll put that in that taxation, which now that makes 4 cards in there. Alright, we draw the next card, which is a neutral action card. The new chairman of the assembly can start an expedition. So that's the green player's decision, and he says, yeah, I'm going to start an expedition, a Ceylon expedition. So he's going to put an expedition marker there, and since he's chairman of the assembly, he decides first whether he's going to invest in it, and he decides that yes, he's going to invest 2 or 5 in that expedition. And then the blue player, he says yeah, he'll invest 3 in that expedition, and then the red player says yeah, he's going to invest 3 in that expedition as well. And then the head of the church could decide if he wants to bless that expedition, and he does have 1 faith, he could bless it. But since the Ceylon has the best odds of being successful anyway, he's not going to bless us. Now, we advance any other expeditions that were underway. That brings the Spice Island expedition in to the 3rd space, so now we'll resolve that expedition. So we'll draw 1 fake card to see the results of that expedition. We look here, right in this area. It is the Spice Island expedition. Oh, no news. So it doesn't mean it's failed, but it doesn't get to resolve this time. So we just discard this card. So we'll have to wait until the next... Oh, well, there was another card there, but anyway. We'll have to wait until the next Fund Expedition card to see if that one resolves. So now this just goes back. And we draw the last card. That's Red's card. So he can gain 2 crowns, gain 1 vote. Now, I did want to mention if a player played this card and he gained a vote, and that gave him more votes than any other player, he would not become chairman of the assembly. You only get that if you play the rally support card, and you only get the become head of the church when you play the serve the church card. So even if some other time you end up gaining more votes than the current chairman of the assembly, or more faith than the current head of the church, it doesn't swap at that time. It's only when those cards are played that it can swap. So anyway, this guy, he can do one of these things. We'll just say he's going to choose to gain a vote, and then this goes into his hand. And so now we're out of action cards there. So now we go to the upkeep phase. Alright, first thing in the upkeep phase is we see if any noble or any baron controls more than half of the unraised cities in the kingdom. Nobody does. In fact, the only one that controls a city is the blue player, and he just controls 1. Next, each baron gains 1 influence for each city he controls. The only baron that controls any cities is the blue baron. So he'll take 1 influence from the influence pool and put that in his area. So if the influence pool was now empty, whoever had the most influence would win, but obviously the influence pool is not empty. Now we would check for revolts if any baron controlled a city but didn't have a noble in it, where the only controlled city is this one by the blue player, but his noble is in there, so we don't have to draw to see if there's a revolt. Next we would do C movement arrivals, but nobody's moved by C, so there's nothing to do there. Now next we refresh nobles, so blue, he's got 2 to refresh, his circle and his star. Green doesn't have any to refresh, he didn't do anything with his. Red does have 1 to refresh. Then if there were any nobles off the board, we would return those nobles to the board. Alright, so we start another round. I've already done the planning phase where the players have picked their cards and placed them on the board, along with the chairman of the assembly putting the neutral action cards in shuffle. Now I just want to show a few things that we haven't shown yet. So alright, so we'll go ahead and start this round with the actions phase. Again, the chairman of the assembly will reveal the top card. That's blue's card. He can choose one of those things to do. He's going to go ahead and start a battle with his star player at this siege city, because the siege has not been lifted and he still has a higher strength than this city, which has a strength of 100, or a defense strength of 100, and he's at 250. Then he conquers this city. So The siege token is removed, and one of his control markers will now go there. And then that noble is exhausted, and this versatile strategy card just goes back into his hand of cards. Alright, the next card is revealed. Green did a versatile strategy, and we'll just say he's going to he'll just gain 2 crowns. That's probably not what he would normally do, but alright, and this goes back into his hand of cards. Alright, the next one is revealed. That's blues levy taxes, gain 1 crown for each area that contains one of his nobles. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. So he'll just put a 1 back and get a 5. And then this goes into the taxation. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's almost time. Remember, those special areas resolve when there's 2 times the number of players. So just 1 more in there. Alright, important event. Head of the church chooses a baron to resolve the top event. The top event is red. So the head of the church either has to draw that himself or pay 1 faith to have somebody else draw it. So since blue's ahead, he thinks he's going to go ahead, pay 1 faith, which he has, and he's going to tell blue that he has to draw that event card. So blue draws it. No heir. Randomly choose one of your nobles and place this card on him. If this noble dies, his card is removed from the game. So normally I said a noble, if they get killed, they can come back during the upkeep phase, and it's supposedly like their heir allows them to come back. But now one of blue's heirs, he has no heir, so if this noble happens to get killed, he will not come back. And we'll just put it on this guy that's already exhausted. So now, I don't know if I mentioned this, and I don't think I did during the rules overview, but you'll see down here where it says cancel event. He could pay 2 faith to cancel this event, and then it wouldn't take effect. It would just get discarded. Unfortunately, he's only got 1 faith, so he can't pay that to cancel this event. So he just has to take it. You can't cancel it in the future. If you have 2 faith in the future, you can't then pay to cancel it then. You have to cancel it as soon as it's drawn. Anyway, this now goes into the neutral action card pile. We draw a new neutral action card. Oh, another one of these. Alright, well, it's green, so the head of the church could pay 1 faith to draw that himself, but he doesn't have a faith anymore, so now he has to choose one of the other barons to get it. So he'll choose the red baron to get that. So the red baron draws it. Draw the top card of the draw the top mercenary card and assign it to any of your nobles on the board. So he gets to draw the top card of the mercenary pile. He gets Romanians 100, and he can assign it to any of his mercenaries on the board. He'll assign it to this guy. Alright, we go to the next card. That is green, levy taxes, gain 1 crown for each area that contains one of your nobles. So he gets 4 crowns. So again, he'll just return 1, get a 5. Now this goes into the taxation, and now that taxation, because there's 2 times the number of players' cards in there, that taxation is going to resolve. So barons will get income from their cities and concessions. Currently the only baron that has cities is blue. He has 2 cities, so he'll get 4 income for that. So he'll just put 1 back and get a 5. Nobody has any concessions. Now all these cards will go back to their owners. So green will get his, blue will get his, blue will get his, red will get his, green will get his, and blue will get his. Alright, next is red, serve the church, gain 1 faith. Then if you have more than any other, become head of the church. He doesn't have more. Blue has one and he has one. So even though he has more than the current head of the church, because he doesn't have more faith than any other baron, he doesn't become head of the church. And he just decides which one of these areas it goes into. He'll put it into the taxation. Alright, resolve the last card here. Draft soldiers. Place one of your baron markers on the mercenary track for free. This is reds, so he places it on the mercenary track, and then he places this card in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that doesn't resolve yet. Alright, so now we have a mercenary draft. So starting with blue, he can choose one of these to draft. So he likes these 200 troops from the Poles, but it costs 4. So he'll put a 5, return 1, and now he gets that one. He has to immediately assign to a noble that is either in a city or stronghold, or just assign it to the stronghold. He wants to probably assign it to this one that doesn't have to pay any wages, and so that's what he's going to do. So he assigns it to this guy, and now that puts him at a 350 troop strength, so he won't have to pay wages to those guys. So he's chosen. Now green gets to choose one. Green will choose this 100 Swiss, or he could, because he's got 2 on there, he could go ahead and get both these English if he wanted to, but I don't think he wants to do that right now. So he'll get this 100 Swiss. It's going to cost him 2. And he doesn't have any troops in any city he controls, or any nobles in any city he controls, because he doesn't control any, number one. So he can't assign this to any of his nobles, so he's just going to assign it to his stronghold. He can later move one of his nobles to his stronghold and transfer those troops if he wants to. Alright, he now has another one, but he just decides he's not going to hire any other one with that one. So then it's red's turn. Red will take the 100 English, so he's got to pay 2 for that. And he'll take those 100 English, but again, he also doesn't own a city or have a noble in a city he controls. So he can't assign these to them, so he will also assign this to his stronghold. Alright, so these markers go back to their players. These cards go back to their players. This remaining mercenary gets shuffled back into the mercenary deck, and then I deal out one more than the number of players. Like so. Alright, I'd like to continue on and get to where I had a noble on noble battle and show an assembly, but this video is already well over 2 hours, and I think I just better wrap it up. Nobody's going to watch this long anyway. So just my opinion of this game. I've played it both just solo and with other players. I think everybody that I've played it with likes it, thinks it's a good game. I think we're a little iffy on the combat system. I think that is probably our least favorite part of the game. I mean, it's not a terrible combat system, but we've thought about revising it, maybe where you get 1 die for every 100 troop strength you have, and then roll the dice and get hit on a 5 or 6, and that inflicts casualties or something like that. I'm not sure. We haven't done that when we've played it. I think the last time I played this was 2019, but anyway, just wanted to mention that the combat system's not bad, but I think it is our least favorite part. But overall, I like the action system, the way you select the cards to, say what each player is going to do, that, and when they get to go. So my opinion is it's a fun game. I know it's an old game, not in print anymore. You can probably find a used copy. There is an expansion, Crown and Glory, which I do have. These are the expansion. I took it out so I could do the video just on the base game. It adds a few things like some technology type cards and a different fate deck and just a few other things, which I think does improve the game. But I think the base game is good even without the expansion. Anyway, I've got to wrap this up. It's way too long. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.